Hi everyone, welcome to the evaluation training for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Great Stories Club. This session is a presentation of ALA's Public Programs Office and Become with support from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. My name is Samantha Oakley. I'm a program officer here in the Public Programs Office and will be acting as your ALA contact for evaluation through the grant period. Throughout the project, all of you will be working with Become, our independent evaluators for TRHT GSC. Become is a center for community engagement and social change that seeks to cultivate a socially just world through culturally responsive evaluation, research, and community development. We are excited to be working with Become and are pleased to have two representatives from the organization with us today to walk you through the evaluation expectations and process for the initiative. And then next slide, please. First up, I'd like to introduce Rita Fierro. She is a consultant with Become. Rita has conducted evaluations for foundations, universities, community-based organizations, and nonprofits. She uses mixed method designs to highlight the perspectives of different stakeholders and triangulate data results, especially among vulnerable populations. Rita specializes in mixed method study design, data collection and analysis, and facilitation of decision-making processes. She is currently the chair of the Independent Consulting Topical Interest Group for the American Evaluation Association after serving as program co-chair for the past 2 years. I'd also like to introduce Alicia Anderson, who has a range of experiences in public health, business data analytics, program evaluation, human resources, and finance. Alicia is the program manager and consultant with Become. She applies an eclectic approach to working with individuals and organizations. Alicia's interests include organizational behavior management, performance management, program evaluation, streamlining processes, and creating efficiencies on a day-to-day basis for individuals and companies. She has assisted companies with talent acquisition, staff training, and process improvement. Alicia is driven by her passion for building a community and applying behavior analytic principles to issues of social significance. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn things over to Rita.
So Become is the organization that Alicia and I are working for that is in charge of the evaluation of the Great Stories Club, Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And I'm really excited to be here today and share this information with you. We had the pleasure to look at to do a pilot with a few sites in terms of how the work was going last year. And we're really excited to move forward with a new step, leveraging all the learning that we've had. So what we want to focus on today is really an evaluation and just offer you something and some theory. So the first thing that we want to point out is that when we think about evaluation, what we really mean is infusing evaluative thinking in the programming. And I'd just like you to consider that for a minute, that you already know what evaluative thinking is. So for those of you, for instance, who stock your libraries, you're already thinking in your mind, you're paying attention to what students are reading, what they're most excited about. You know, you have them try different things, or you have teachers try different things, and then you're collecting information on how students are reacting to see how the libraries that you stocked are impacting their learning. So I'd like you to consider that evaluative thinking is something that we do naturally in all of our professions. If we think about the ancient folks who learned how to farm, did so inside of exploring what was most effective for animals and what was most effective for the crops. And so evaluative thinking is an integral part of how we are as humans, and it isn't just this juxtaposed big program outside, coming in from the outside, which is generally how we think about evaluation. And so from a theoretical framework, what evaluation is really focused on is creating an iterative learning process where we consciously decide what we're exploring, we consciously collect data around that, we consciously analyze the data, and then we consciously reflect on what it is that we discovered so that we can decide going forward what decisions to make next. So it's this iterative process. So the overview of how through our is the purpose. We'll do an introduction and overview, purpose and evaluation, look at program evaluation, evaluative thinking, which in part I mentioned already, evaluation theory, culture and context, and the TRHT. And then we'll look specifically, so that's all general, and then we'll look more specifically at what the TRHT GSC evaluation will look like. So one of the, as I was saying, evaluative thinking is infused in everything we do, but the first question we really want to ask is, what is our purpose? What is it that we want to explore? What is it that we're out to create in the world? And where is it that we want our learning to really be infused with what it is that we're out to create in the world? So what is the purpose of what we're doing? So we know that for the GSC TRHT, we're really committed to students increasing their interest in learning. We're really interested in students becoming agents of change. Like, we're really interested in having this be a space where students can be vibrant and have like engaged conversations around things that are really relevant to their lives. So the first thing you want to think about is, what is your purpose? So evaluation can be used to examine if you're making progress towards your purpose or not. Once we've identified what that core goal is, evaluation helps us see where on the journey we are. Evaluation can look at how your purpose is being achieved, and evaluation can inform you how you move forward to realize your goals. So evaluation can be making a judgment about the amount, number, or value of something, or activities designed to learn the impact of a program, policy, or initiative. So the purpose typically is to improve what it is that we're doing. And again, like, we do all this through infusing evaluative thinking in our work. So program evaluation specifically is the set of activities designed. So I'm going to take a step back and do this one more time. So evaluation is making a judgment in general. And so oftentimes when teachers think about evaluation, they think about being evaluated in the classroom. Program evaluation is looking at the program as a whole. And so there are a set of activities, which are data collection and then our data analysis, that have us look at the program as a whole and look at the program, how the program can be improved as a whole. So again, I was talking in the beginning about that cycle that we think about in evaluative thinking. So there are different stages to an evaluation process. The first one is engaging stakeholders. The second one is developing evaluation questions, and that's kind of us asking, what exactly is it that we want to achieve? And so that we know like what questions are guiding our inquiry. Then we collect information to answer those questions. We analyze the information that we collected, and then we disseminate, which means we put out the information to other people in different formats so that people can think more about how this information affects what they're up to. And that process of reflection is one that we do with you. It's one that we do with the program managers. And it's really an opportunity then to engage stakeholders again. So stakeholders are the people who have a stake on the project. And so once we've gone through this cycle of collecting information to disseminating information, then we start all over again, because now we can use the results from the prior year, from the prior cycle, to inform the future cycle. There are four main types of evaluation. There's process evaluation, formative evaluation, summative evaluation, and developmental evaluation. So process evaluation is generally an evaluation where you literally look at the process by which a program works, and you assess the extent to which that process is effective at gaining whatever the program is out to gain. Formative is similar to process evaluation, and formative evaluation has you give formative feedback so that the process of the evaluation the evaluation can improve. And formative evaluation is also what we typically call outcome evaluation. So it's looking at what exactly is the program out to achieve, and are the processes and are the activities that we're doing reaching those goals or not? And if they're not, how can we give formative feedback? Like, how can we give the kind of feedback and recommendations that has it improve going forward? Summative evaluation is probably what most people think of when they think of program evaluation. Like, it's generally at the summit, so it's at the end of a project, and it's really trying to, after many years typically, and it's really trying to gauge, was it worth the investment? Would we do it again? Does this model work? It's really a kind of summation of all the work of the project or the program to really see if it was worth the time, and really making some intensive decisions about whether there's to fund it again or not. So that's typically what summative evaluation is. And developmental evaluation is quite different, because as you heard, each of these three processes have kind of a linear approach. There's kind of a beginning, middle, and end. There's a beginning of the project, middle of the project, end of the project. Developmental evaluation is a cycle in a different way. So it's really an inquiry process. It's a discovery. So if you can think of being in a question, I think, Alicia, can you think of an example that would be appropriate for librarians? If you want to think of the discovery of the experience that a particular student has reading a book, and you actually don't have an idea at all about what that may look like or what experience they may have, you may suggest the book to 4 or 5 different students and just ask them to like talk with you after they've read it. That's an example. That could be an example of a developmental evaluation. So your question is, does this book motivate them? And it can just be an inquiry question, and then you discover as you go forward how that works. So I jumped the gun and talked about evaluative thinking beforehand. And I did probably because when I talk about evaluation, I always like to put evaluative thinking beforehand. And that's because I think evaluative thinking is an integral part of how we are as human beings. So evaluative thinking is critical thinking. It's an attitude of inquisitiveness. It's a belief in the value or the use of data to inform practice, to inform reflective practice, identifying assumptions. It's posing thoughtful questions, pursuing deeper understanding through reflection and perspective taking, and informing decisions in preparation for action. And again, while in this case you have an evaluation firm that's focusing on the program evaluation, evaluative thinking is really integral to almost everything we do as human beings. So, and that's really the backbone of evaluation. It's thinking critically, being inquisitive about what's next, thinking about the value of information, looking at assumptions, and just thinking reflectively on what it is that we know and what can we learn next. So as a result of evaluation and program evaluation in particular, there's more evidence gathering and sharing, so we can make decisions that are driven by evidence instead of hunches, which gives us basically a more certain foundation to make decisions based on. We get more feedback. So sometimes the feedback that we get is a little random. So we only get feedback on what we do if some random person decides to, walk up to our desk and actually tell us how something impacted them. What happens when we do a program evaluation is that we're collecting that feedback systematically so that everyone has an opportunity to share. We have reflective conversations among all the people involved. And I know that Samantha, we've had several with you and with your staff around, okay, based on what we saw from the pilot, what really works? What do we tweak? What do we want to do next time? And then we create diagrams and models to illustrate the thinking. Alicia, in a bit, will share with you the theory of change that we came up with. And so that's a diagram or model that helps illustrate our thinking, helps us see how the program evolves. Programs are not fixed things because human beings are complex, and every time there's a human being involved, things are going to get messy. So what we do as program evaluators is try to streamline the messiness, but also be present to what the messiness is teaching us. And also, it helps us build more effective staff and programs, and it helps greater field staff influence over project decisions. So again, if you're getting feedback on a regular basis, you're getting feedback by different stakeholders, people who are involved in the process, and people who are experiencing the process, and people who created the process. Hearing those perspectives really helps inform project decisions. So in terms of evaluation theory, the foundation and the backbone of our work together is culturally responsive evaluation and utilization-focused evaluation. These are two specific types of evaluation, and as the word describes, one focuses on culture and the other one focuses on use. So we're committed to being present to people's culture, and we're committed to it being useful to the project. So culturally responsive evaluation really has three core pillars. And the reason why they're described here as three circles that are intertwined in a Venn diagram is because there's really no, although we can say pillars, there's really, they intertwine and they overlap. And the first one is culture, which doesn't just mean like culture as in language or nationality, but it also means like subculture. So we know that what it's like to live, so I live in Philadelphia, so what it's like to live in Philadelphia is very different from what it's like to live in New Orleans. What it's like to go to a school that's well-resourced is a very different experience than going to a school that isn't well-resourced. What it's like to live in the United States is very different than what it's like to live in India. And so because the experience is different, the way humans organize culturally around whatever those strengths and limitations are is absolutely different. And that's really what creates the backbone of culture. The other piece is community. And community is extremely important because sometimes what's been prominent in prior research approaches is to look in particular at communities of color as with a deficit lens. So sometimes we look at other cultures or in a way that we only look at what they're missing. And oftentimes what people with fewer resources do is build really strong communities. Because in the absence of prolific resources, oftentimes people come together in a stronger way. So paying attention to community also means really paying attention to what the strengths are and paying attention to how people come together. And it means not looking only individually at what a person has or doesn't have, but also how is that community functioning together. And the context, as you heard from my first two examples, are connected to community and culture, because the context is really the environment from which the culture arrives, and the community thrives and rises, and the community is the way in which it operates. So if we look at all these things, and context can also be something like a lot broader, like, oh, at that particular school, the librarian, at that particular library, the librarian was fired 3 months ago and everybody loved her. and everybody's still recovering from the discomfort of that person missing, because she was like a community mama and no one thought it would happen to her, right? So that's a context. So it's really important for us when we operate in a space to know what the culture is, to know what the context is, and to know how the community is operating. And so that is really the backbone of culturally responsive evaluation, is to never dismiss, but actually put at the center these three core pillars. So that however we interpret data, however we interpret what's happening, we are really standing in this being the backbone, the bubble, the context, the place from which we're operating. And all this informs a really critical self-reflection moving forward. Utilization evaluation is, simply said, like making sure the evaluation is useful. There are evaluation reports that end up on shelves. I've made a promise to myself about 10 years ago to not write any of them anymore. So what we're really committed to as a firm, as Become, but also in our personal practice, is that anything that we offer be useful to you in what you're up to. And so making evaluation useful means ensuring results are used in the program in organizational decision-making, that those who use the results are involved in designing the evaluation, because if you help us design it, then it's more likely that it'll be helpful to the decisions that you have to make, and that users are part of the analysis and receive feedback throughout. And that's basically what we've done for the pilot. We wrote a report, we had discussions around the report so that we were absolutely certain that what we were offering was useful and was useful for how to move forward. So if you think about, so take a moment to just think, right? So how do you see culture and context playing out in this work in your community, right? How can we respond to culture and context at your sites? So there are this is a project that's happening nationally. There's a great variety of schools that are involved, of sites that are involved. Some are at juvenile justice institutions, some are at alternative schools. So there's just a great variety. So take a moment to just think, how does culture and context play a role in your community? And now I'm going to hand it over to Alicia to share with you how we met some of these challenges and how we designed this evaluation to meet the challenges of having different contexts and different sites, and what we're really focusing on moving forward.
Thanks, Rita. So we will transition from speaking about evaluation in theory and general to the specifics of the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Great Stories Club evaluation, the TRHT GSC. Next slide, please. So our evaluation of the TRHT GSC looks at the current strategies and expected outcomes, and we compare them to the actual results of the program during and after its implementation across sites. So as stated, the TRHT GSC provides specialized library services to high-need teens by delivering books, programming resources, in-person discussion events, and access to racial healing practitioners for those who don't commonly have access to those opportunities. It fosters grassroots partnerships with community organizations that serve high-need youth, providing young people with vital connections to libraries and other nonprofits that can be important to success after incarceration, graduation, or during other periods of change. And it presents a nationally recognized, closely curated collection of books that reflects the diverse identities and experiences of young adults, especially those from traditionally underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. Next slide. So this theory of change presents an illustration of the desired outcomes or changes that can be expected within the specified context. So if you remember when Rita talked about culturally responsive evaluation earlier, she mentioned culture, community, and context. So for this theory of change, it's expected that participants in the TRHT GSC program will become powerful agents of change by affirming human equity through storytelling and being valued in the context of structural inequity. So this illustration is cyclical rather than linear because the lessons learned from each component of the cycle and each iteration of the program and beyond should further strengthen and guide the process of becoming and being powerful agents of change. So if you can note that for more information about the theories of change and about the process, you can see the presentation on findings from the pilot program evaluation that we'll do in the very near future. Next slide. And as Rita mentioned previously, one of the components of evaluation is developing evaluation questions. So with its strategies and goals in mind, in this evaluation, there are 7 questions that we seek to answer. So what are the strategies, activities, processes, and content that engage youth and support youth program presented as part of the TRHT GSC? And what were the most helpful strategies in building meaningful relationships with youth participants? 2, for staff and youth, how effective was the TRHT GSC in supporting narrative change and expanding an understanding of personal and structural racism and human equity? 3, how were the racial healing circles implemented and what was the perception of youth participants in the racial healing circles? Question 4, what was the structure and process of community partnerships for assisting youth in their process of racial healing? 5, to what extent has the self-perception of young people and librarians as agents of change shifted over the course of the program period? 6, what can be improved in future iterations of the program for young people and librarians? And 7, what is needed within ALA and beyond to support the sustainability of this work in libraries? Next slide. So to answer these questions, we collect data through observation of various program components, and we use tools such as surveys, interview, and focus group protocols, and reflection logs. And some of these tools and resources you'll find in the resource packet that you'll receive from ALA. So what is your role in collecting or providing data for this evaluation, or what's required of you? You're required to complete a minimum of 3 surveys, 1 survey at the end of each book. So the exact number of surveys that you complete will depend on how many books you select for your TRHT GSC program. And the purpose of these surveys is to learn the strategies, activities, processes, and content, i.e. books, that work well for supporting narrative change with participants and integrating lessons learned into future iterations of TRHT GSC. This will also help us better understand the library project director's experiences, observations, and lessons learned after the completion of each book. A sample of sites will be selected to participate in library project director interviews. And the purpose of these interviews is to assess the impact of the TRHT GSC on how students' perception of their own experiences, personal and structural racism, and human equity change over time, to understand how community partnerships are being utilized and functioning, and to explore ways to improve how the program works. Additionally, a sample of sites will be selected to coordinate youth focus groups and interviews. And the purpose of those focus groups and interviews is to assess the impact of sessions on the students' understanding of narrative change, personal racism, structural racism, and human equity. And then there's also you can complete a reflection log, but that is optional after each session with youth. The reflection logs are optional and used to determine how sessions are being implemented. And we'll give you an example of some reflection log questions in the next few slides. So here's some questions, some sample questions from the survey that you'll take following the completion of each book. Example questions and statements that you'll respond to after the completion of each book are: Things like, please describe any group activities, conversations, or themes that worked well when discussing the book. How did you prepare yourself and youth for the discussion of the book? List some strategies that worked well or that didn't work well, for supporting how youth participants see themselves related to social inequity. List some activities that did work well or didn't work well for supporting how youth participants see themselves related to social inequity. And what was your most memorable experience from the book discussion? And like I said, these are just sample questions. Some of these questions may change pending further input on the survey, and a link to the finalized survey will be provided in your resource packet. So some sample questions from the optional reflection log include what type of check-in was done with youth participants, what questions were asked during the session, what activities were facilitated, did you have any wow moments, or was there anything that inspired you during the session? Was there anything that made you think or that surprised you? Was there anything that didn't work during the session? And while only the end of book survey is required, we strongly encourage you to complete all of the pre and post session reflection, because this information is useful to help you reflect throughout your project, document youth participant responses, organize program content, identify gaps and opportunities, and complete your final reports. And you'll get a separate webinar for final reporting process and requirements. So where does evaluation go? We collect and analyze the data from library project directors, from community partners, youth participants, racial healers, and other stakeholders. And from that data, from our analysis, we compile a report to answer each of the evaluation questions and provide recommendations moving forward. And if you saw in some of the tools and the example tools that we talked about, they're related specifically to certain items from the evaluation question. And the report is then disseminated to various audiences and stakeholders, and we also do a formal presentation of the findings. The findings can be used to improve training for funders and grantees, program processes, and strategies for future iterations of the program. And findings can also be used to secure grants to continue the program, and in some cases inform policy to create a broader social impact. So in this case, something like changing the policy around high-need teens in general, or making social resources available to high-need youth. And now I can turn it over to ALA so they can discuss their commitment to this evaluation.
Thanks, both Rita and Alicia. That was extremely helpful. And as they mentioned, ALA is looking forward to seeing all the findings from all the work our grantees will be putting into the project throughout the grant period. Our commitment is to using the evaluation to influence future projects, taking the findings from that, learning from it. Also, we do share the evaluation, so it will go to not just our project funders, but also to the field to learn from. And we will be sharing the post-grant findings through a Zoom session in 2020. So yeah, that is our commitment, and thank you once again to Rita and Alicia for leading us through this evaluation expectations for the grant. We're looking forward to working with all of you throughout the course of the project.